So good afternoon, everyone. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. Welcome to Business as Usual. And today's Thursday. I always have to say that out loud because I never remember what day it is of the week. And I'm joined here today with Jonathan Kirsting. He's Vice President of all things media and marketing. And we're going to have some fun as we try to do each and every day. And I'm very thrilled to have the CEO and co-founder, Jake Loosararian, and he is at the helm of Gecko Robotics. And I'm gonna bring him to the forefront in a moment. Just want to get some housekeeping out of the way, and then we can dive in and have some fun. I want to give special thanks to Huntington Bank, and they've been our partners and friends in doing all things innovative, and particularly as we pivoted during COVID. I believe we're, doing about 160 sessions. Is that where we are right now, Jonathan? About 160?
Yeah, we're like deep into the 160s now. It's like
right. So each and every day, we're trying to bring you relevance and shine the spotlight on people who are doing amazing things in our region and bringing the world to Pittsburgh and vice versa. So we're pretty excited about today's guest because this is a company that has really grown and doing some really interesting things and changing the face of the businesses that they're involved in. So we've muted your microphones just so that there's no noise in the background, and we've allowed for a chat. The chat is used so that we can talk to Jake. It's not used to sell your wares. That's not what today is about. And then the other thing is, you can see I have my Tech 50 screen up, and there's still time to join us today. We're pretty excited about Tech 50. It is the first time in 24 years that Tech 50 has ever been virtual. And the team has done an amazing job, lots of opportunities, and you'll be joined by hundreds of people who are participating and celebrating the winners, the finalists, Pittsburgh, and just trying to have some fun as we're entering the winter months and COVID. So we've put the registration out there for Tech 50, so please join us. So I mentioned our guest today is Jake. He's a founder and CEO of Gecko Robotics. And I think Lexi will put the link up just so that maybe you can multitask and see what they're up to. And so Jake, good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking the time of joining us today. We are very excited to talk with you. I know that it's been an intense time for most companies, but it's really exciting to just take 30 minutes and do a little bit of a dive with you and what you've been up to. So, but before we start, let's just talk about Jake. Who is Jake? What has Jake's journey been? And then we're going to talk about Gecko.
Awesome. Thanks, Audrey. Great to be on the show. And what you guys are doing in the city of Pittsburgh and beyond is exciting to know you and the team and be a part of it. So yeah, it's great to be here. A little bit about me. I'm an engineer by training. Went to Grove City College, actually an hour north of here, and there studied electrical engineering. And a little bit about like my journey as an entrepreneur. I started Gecko in college, and basically the impetus of solving the problem coming with the company was there was a alumni of the school who was a power plant manager nearby who 40% of the year was having plant shutdowns and not being able to make power. And I've always been kind of interested in power and renewables. And this was an interesting way to try to contribute to solving an important problem for this engineering manager. And so I built a wall climbing robot for him, as you do, and began to learn about the industry. And I learned about the different kinds of problems in the industry, what they face but most of it are revolving around infrastructure integrity and what happens, when infrastructure fails. The things that we rely on, whether it's a bridge or a dam, a power plant, refinery, manufacturing sites, et cetera, they all have infrastructure that's critical to their process. And when those pieces of infrastructure don't work like they should, they end up causing these massive amounts of both environmental safety and also large opportunity cost loss to the customers as well as the repair side. And so it was a pretty compelling mission to begin to try to take these industries in the ways that they traditionally do things, which is with humans in dangerous environments, with little amounts of data, and do the inverse. And so that's what I did. And for it, I ended up becoming basically homeless and broke.
Really?
Yeah. So ended up becoming very poor, spent my whole life savings. And in about 2015, I was bootstrapping the company at the time. My co-founder, Troy, said we should check out this thing called Y Combinator. And I didn't really know what Y Combinator was. And I met a couple people at CMU, a part of Y Combinator. And around the same time I got an offer to go out to do Y Combinator, I got an acquisition offer. And so at this point, very poor, $100 to my name gig, had a pretty interesting decision. And I decided to stay poor and continue on the journey to pursue the vision of Gecko.
Wow.
And then from there, we raised a little over $2 million after demo day, and came out of YC as the odd duck from Pittsburgh,
Right.
doing hardware and in the industrial sector as the top company coming out of Y Combinator for our batch. And since then, I've raised about $62 million. Wow.
So wait, so let's just pause for a second. Were you homeless?
I was living on the floor of my best friend's apartment. So
For how long? For how long?
Probably about 9 to 12 months.
Wow. Okay. So I just wanted to be sure. Okay. So you weren't living in your car, but you were close to it. Did you have a car?
Yeah. I did. Yeah. It was a nice hand-me-down from my father. So that was really helpful.
So when you so here you are, you leave Y Combinator, and then you say, okay, you're going to come back to Pittsburgh. Are you native Pittsburgher?
I'm not. No. So I'm originally from the Columbia, Maryland area near DC, and went up here for university, and then worked in the area, and then we moved out to California. And to be honest, I wasn't sure if I was going to come back. I'd loved CMU. We had hired a couple people out of CMU in the robotics sector, and I knew some amazing investors and business leaders in the city. But my whole network became Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And so after we launched, I had to think really hard about, okay, well, what are the competitive advantages that could help Gecko succeed and become the next unicorn and beyond? And one of the competitive advantages is actually cost of living. The other competitive advantage is CMU, and the other competitive advantage is close to customers. And for those competitive advantages, Pittsburgh made some sense. The thing that was going to be hard to give up was the knowledge sharing of the valley and the talent of the valley. Those were difficult trade-offs.
Right.
But we decided to come back to Pittsburgh in April or May of 2016, and so we're actually nearby Bakery Square now, we're about 7 people at that point, or 6
Right.
people, and now we're about 115 employees.
In Pittsburgh?
We have offices in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually been expanding our Austin office, as well as our, and then also.
So how many people are in?
Are the two hubs for Gecko. So we have about probably about 85, 83 of the employees here in Pittsburgh.
Okay, and so talk about the local customers. You're close. You were talking about one of the advantages.
Yeah. So we actually started in the power industry when we launched out of YC, and so we were. Our tagline was we build robots, wall-climbing robots for industrial inspection, starting in the power space. And so that's what we do. We make these robots that collect infrastructure data that help predict when things will break. And in the power space, we have a lot of power plants in Pennsylvania, a lot of power plants in West Virginia and the surrounding tri-state area. So that was helpful, being able to live at these power plants, whether it be gas or coal. Mm-hmm. just began to learn about the problems that these industries face and the different types of applications that our robots could be used for, and actually accelerated our ability to develop robots that didn't suck.
And so what's going on in, so you have people in Austin, right? So
Yeah.
you have customers all over the world, because I believe that when we were in Japan, that someone from your team went to Japan, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we're working with Plug and Play. It's a program in Japan. We're actually doing a job right now in Seoul, Korea. We do jobs in South America pretty often, and we are in pretty deep discussions with Europe and the Middle East. But because of the pandemic, we're not. Our international is a lot less than we were planning on this year for obvious reasons.
So if you think of just the biggest problems that you're solving right now, I know that you've mentioned a few different things, and then we're going to talk about what's happened and a couple of things that you've done during the pandemic. The biggest problem that you think you're solving, we're in an elevator together. You're going to tell me.
Yeah, that's a great question.
What?
So in these really critical industries, these industries don't know when they're going to have a failure of their process or not. And if you're a refinery and you don't know that, tomorrow you could wake up, or middle of the night you could wake up, and a pipeline has exploded and releasing bad emissions into the environment. People are injured or worse, and then also you have to shut down production. And if you're that refinery, you're losing $25 to $40 million a day, depending on price of oil. So really, really rough in terms of the impact to the business and the environment, humanitarian, et cetera. So the big impact that what we're trying to solve at its core is, the infrastructure integrity objective is to try and stop things from breaking, right? And so the way that we've always done it to this point is send humans into these environments and use handheld sensors to gather infrastructure integrity data points, corrosion, erosion, et cetera, and try to sample these large pieces of infrastructure like pipelines, tanks, et cetera, and try to hope that you're finding the right point that's going to cause and lead to failure. So you're collecting very little amounts of data, 0.00001% of potential damage area. You are doing it with a human, which about 100 people a year either die or injured doing these inspections. And then you're also spending a lot of time doing it. So you're spending, compared to the robot, 10 times to 100 times more to get, 50,000, 100,000 less data points.
Right.
So what we're doing is basically flipping that on its head and accelerating how quickly we can capture the data. We're structuring the data so we can use it on the machine learning and AI side to predict when things will break and beyond. And we're also doing it safely. So that's kind of the value prop. It's 10 and beyond safer, 10 times faster, 1,000 or more times more effective at finding the damage area, and then it's also safe. So, in essence, what we're doing is we're gathering data that's never existed before. And you think about how facilities run themselves; they have all of this automation equipment, right, to track how efficient the operations are. They don't have any way to tell what's happening to the things that are moving gas or moving product from place to place and then processing it. So what we're doing is we're gathering the data that doesn't exist to help make their processes more efficient and predict when things will fail.
So do you have a standard robot that can apply across all these different customers, or do you build custom to solve based on the industry?
That's a really good question. And one of the hard things about robotics is it typically only solves a couple of problems. It's not very modular. And the trick is making your robots modular, making them cost effective, making them able to be packaged and travel
Right.
to places. And then when you get on site, being able to have it do as many things as you possibly can. So our team of our hardware and team has done an incredible job of paying close attention to architecture. And if you think about hardware architecture, the same way that, let's say, Tesla thinks about architecture, they use very similar base models to be able to make different kinds of cars. So you have your similar kinds of chassis and drivetrains, and then you kind of make the form factors look different with some different, with some other changes. It's kind of similar to the way we think about it. If we can make a platform that that's very good, has very good architecture, and we can adjust its form factor to whether it's a 6-inch pipe inspection or a boiler inspection, we can very quickly iterate. So we have about 2 main platforms. One's called the Toka 4, one's called the Toka Mini. So we can do about, I think we're up to like 60, 70 different types of assets with different form factors on those assets.
Okay,
so it's
great.
very
So
wide.
we have some questions here that I want Jonathan to start to grab.
So this is some great questions here, and thanks for joining us today, Jake. We really appreciate it. So from Jason Hunt is curious to know, is Gecko's work entirely in the inspection space, or do you also work on other industrial automation as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Industrial automation is an interesting term. Would like to probably know what that means a little bit more. But basically, we're in the business of, and this is how I think about robots. Robots are very exciting to develop. I love them myself, made them myself. But I view robots as the vehicle by which we gather data that doesn't exist, and then the ability to take that data and do something helpful with it is value. And our objective is to help our customers immediately by doing the inspections and finding the key areas that have been missed that will cause major damage and major health and safety risks. But also use that structured information to then provide help with root cause about why things are going wrong. Use the data to predict when things will break into the future, how to extend the life of those assets and beyond. So it's this idea of, with companies that are doing AI or ML, you think about data from a hierarchical perspective. And we are basically found that, the data that exists out there from an integrity standpoint is has very low integrity, captured by humans, reported on paper kind of data. And so how we're approaching it is we bias towards capturing massive amounts, terabytes of data, and validating those ourselves, and then using that information to drive efficiencies that never have before been possible because that data doesn't exist. So we basically found that there's no data here that is usable, so we have to create our own. And so robots have been a helpful way to go create our own.
Very cool. And so give us a better feel for the work that you do. Can you maybe share a specific example of a customer you work with and how you've been able to help them out? Yeah.
So there's actually a really good article by BP that came out a week or so ago that was describing from the executive level how Gecko has helped them during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So basically what we will do is we'll take 2, 3, 4 robots, however much the customer wants. We'll go out to their sites and we'll work with them as a partner to not only do the inspection, but help them think about how to solve the problems. And so, we'll do an inspection on, let's say, a 32-inch pipe at BP, and do an inspection that used to take, 40 days and do it in 1 day, and gather, 10, 30, 40,000 times more data, and find areas that have been historically missed, and not just the areas that they were always assuming problems existed, but in other areas as well. That's why full coverage is really important, and we try to get that to be our standards. And so we're basically going in, we're doing the inspection, and then we are looking at it together within our software. We call it the Gecko Portal. And so the Gecko Portal will 3D visualize for the customer their assets, all their areas of concerns, and then talk them through how to mitigate.
Very cool. And so what kind of sensors and what kind of defects are the targets of these inspections?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the defects are difficult to find. And we use a lot of different payloads, lasers, magnetic induction, but we primarily use ultrasonic sensors for our sensing payload. We have a really great team that creates sensor payloads that will be pulsing with high frequency sound waves and then measuring the attenuations of the signals upon return, kind of like a sonogram. So you're doing that to understand the corrosion and erosion on that surface, any cracks and defects, and then you're visually inspecting as well with the robots remotely.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for those kinds of damages that can't be seen unless you destroy the infrastructure and look at it. We're trying to not cut it open and figure it out. But we also are using, encoders for localization, as well as integrating other sorts of localization and sensors to help us understand, where we are in the environment. And we've begun to do autonomous inspections as well at, some of our customer sites like Exxon. But we work with Exxon and Dow and Chevron, Marathon, BP, Shell, those kind of companies.
Big ones right there, that's for sure. Very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want people to know that since COVID, that you guys did a little bit, you jumped right in during COVID, right at the beginning. I mean, you helped hospitals and healthcare workers. So explain that. Explain what happened.
Yeah, great question. Well, I ended up getting pretty connected to a gentleman that I know through my wife's friend, who's works at one of the top respiratory hospitals in Denver area, and we started talking about some of the problems that they were trying to solve. A big problem at the beginning of COVID was distribution of PPE, and so we actually use a lot of PPE in our business, but through the connections at YC and other founders that are in my network, I started immediately talking with founders that I knew about how to masks to UPMC, to the Colorado hospitals that are desperately in need of these, that are expecting these large waves of COVID patients or already have them. We also talked to local ICU doctors and at UPMC, and one of the big things that they needed was ventilation splitters. And so, we were able to create a couple of designs for ventilation splitters and open sourced that. So they were able to be used, and it was amazing. The doctor who we were talking to about, he was at the front lines of all this and figuring out how to best solve for these overloads of patients. Just kept sent me pictures of our ventilation splitters being used in hospitals, and telling me you guys have saved lives through these designs. So we've utilized rapid prototyping that we had to get good at here in Gecko to try to help where we could, as well as helping with the distribution of and supply chain. So I ended up in the day running Gecko, and then in the evening brokering deals with Chinese manufacturers for PPE. So it was kind of an intense, but it's one of those things where it's just you hate just standing by and watching this all happen. And
Right.
I'm sure everyone who's listening felt that same way. And it's well, I don't know if I'm helpful, but I'm gonna try and be helpful. And so the company responded really well to that. So it was cool, and it was a cool thing. I think one of the values of Gecko is make each other better, and we try to stick to that even beyond just our core business.
That's really great. So, you have different locations now. So you're in Austin, you're in Dallas, I believe, or Houston.
Houston, yeah.
Houston, and obviously you're close to your customers, but you're also close to some talent. So you have over 80 people here in Pittsburgh, and you're growing, and obviously you have global clients. What's the difference between, what you find in some of these other places?
Yeah.
What's the difference between Austin and Pittsburgh?
Yeah, good question. We find that there's a lot more examples of successful companies in the enterprise software side in Austin.
Okay.
So sales and software development.
So that's B2B enterprise. Okay.
Yeah, not always, but
Not always. Okay.
Some of the enterprise software and I mean, there's other startups as well, and larger tech companies that go B2C there. But yeah, we really focusing on enterprise software. So we find more examples of people who have done it before there. And then in Houston, that's basically the Silicon Valley for OG, oil and gas. And so from a talent perspective, it makes a lot of sense there. Like we're 10 minutes away from Exxon and Dallas headquarters. And so it's really important to be, there for, be close to our customers. And then in Pittsburgh, very good on the robotics side. We have good business leaders here as well. And we're actually finding that, especially now, people moving from the Valley to Pittsburgh is a possibility.
Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, we just hired our SVP of product is moving from the heart of the Valley to Pittsburgh.
Oh, nice. Good. Okay. So, but what's your advice for Pittsburgh, though? So you're saying
do that more.
Excuse me?
Do that more. Bring more talent to Pittsburgh.
I know. Well, you're doing your part, and we appreciate that. I mean, are people able to work remotely and work for you?
Yeah, they are. We basically have, our policy, and we've iterated it a few times, but our policy is, if you have to touch stuff to come in and do your job, come on in. If not, work from home, and we'll do what we can to help support and iterate how we approach things. But we came out with a COVID response plan, like pretty soon after things started happening, and we basically have said, like, we're I think it was about 2 or 3 months ago that we're working from home or able to work from home until at least the end of Q1 next year. We'll kind of see where things get to. It's been interesting. I think the thing that's really helped me has been, as soon as things happened, I immediately started reaching out to founders, who run work from home companies. Actually, one of the really helpful people from that vantage is the CTO of GitHub. GitHub is a remote company. There's actually a few YC companies that are remote companies as well, Mattermost, for example. But there was about 3 or 4 founders that run remote teams, and basically I just bombarded them with emails and calls to try to understand how they make their team successful. Because it's not like what's the immediate impact of work from home, it's what's the impact in 6 to 9 months. Right. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't think about, and it's our jobs as business leaders to think about, not just the immediate, but longer term, from all aspects of things, mental health, as well as other.
Well, what advice do you have? We've raised some money, and there are a couple of more questions out there, but just quickly, if you could, what's some advice in terms of, like, do you think Y Combinator was the secret for you in terms of being able to raise money?
Yeah, raising capital is an art, and in order to get good at that art, just like anything, you have to practice a lot and you have to get really good coaches. Now for me, Y Combinator was my group of coaches. So I had, 1 or 2, and I'd say coaches is like, I don't think about that outside of more of like 1 to 3 people. I worked with Paul Buchheit, who's the guy who was employee 23 at Google and founder of Gmail. I think he owns we used to own like 1% of Facebook. Castor Eunice, who sold his company to TalkBin to Google, and was a partner at YC. I think it was COO of YC when I was there. And then Jared Friedman, who was the founder of CTO Script before he was a partner. So these are people who helped me. So yes, Founders Fund or YC was really helpful, but it really only was helpful for like the seed stage. Series A and Series B,
right,
is tough. And I think it really just comes down to, building up a resilience and resolve about your company. It was helpful that, I had already gone through like a lot of low points at Gecko, and being homeless helps, like they can't get too much worse than that, right?
So that could be like a, a preamp, like a requirement, a prereq.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, it's startups and being a founder is really painful, and not something I'd recommend to my friends. But it does. It's really important to do. But basically, the really important aspects of it is you have to be able to create. Inertia, and you have to be able to ensure that you're controlling the timelines, not the investors. And so I have a lot of opinions on raising capital, and a lot of it comes down to it's just like fundamentals of sales, but you have to be able to create a reason for them to make a decision, and you have to be able to control the timeline and the flow of information to your investors, and when that happens. And you also have to make sure that you have as many options as possible. You need three term sheets to be able to drive your valuations higher. If you have two, you can't play off them as well. And so in order to get 3 term sheets when you're raising an A or a B or a C or a D, you need a bunch of partner meetings. So, and then you need a bunch of general partner meetings. And so if you're looking to get 3 or 4 term sheets, you need, if you close 20% of the general partner meetings to a term sheet, you're at like 15, 20 meetings for general partner meetings. So that means you're talking to a lot of investors. We had to do that in a very condensed period of time because, again, time is not your friend.
So if you have one thing that you have failed at that you would like to just share, that you don't really regret, but you know that you failed.
Yeah.
What do you hold on to?
Oh, there's a lot.
There's a lot? Okay.
Oh yeah. I make a lot of mistakes. Okay, most recent maybe. I think I'll try not to give like an easy answer, so just give me a second. I think one of the things that's very hard is open and transparent communication, and whatever you think that should be, basically multiply it by 3 or 4. I think that I got a company that's growing fast. A lot of things change, and what used to be thought of as standard operating, or like an idea of what you think the company is, changes like very quickly. Like if you're adding, if you're 2xing headcount like every year, kind of like we are, the company is different every 6 months, and it looks really clear, when it's you and the people around you that are either your direct reports or you're strategizing with, but it gets less clear the further down you go. And I think one thing that I've done a poor job of is communicating intentions with strategy decisions that I've made. So like how does this fit into, something that I refer to this as like our lighthouse or our true north. Where are we going, and how does this fit into getting there? A lot of times, like, I've talked a lot with founders and investors, and so we look at the world a little bit differently from a valuation perspective, or aspect is caught up in there as well, and so there's sometimes like reasons, advantages that I have that not everyone has, and sometimes it can come across as like whether it's on the human side, like the people org side, or just like the technology and direction side, people interpret what they want to interpret. And unless you communicate in the narrative that you want to make sure is communicated, then there's going to be like people's narratives are going to be their own. And so I think like that there's examples of how I did that with the COVID response. I think like my work from home communication was a little unclear, because we have people who have to literally be at the company to do their job, and people who don't, like, so, and that communication needs the extra attention. And so a couple tries, I think, got there, and then spending a bunch of time like talking with individuals. So I think, I think that's one of the things that you don't realize or recognize until you get to a certain point and you're like, oh crap, like, there's not just 5 people anymore.
Well, listen, your candor today has been phenomenal. We have run out of time. Gave you a little bit more time because you're just being human. You're just being human. I love that a Grove City grad went homeless, living on someone's floor, and that created some drive. But I also appreciate that it's a bumpy journey. And, and I also appreciate your candor on saying what's the strengths of the region and the city, and how that compares to other places. And that sort of is what we're trying to do, is get better. And it's our responsibility to be as best as we can for you as you lead this company to the next iteration. I think you are hiring. So there is a Gecko, just go to the Gecko site. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but really appreciate everyone joining us here today. And I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So thank you, Jake, for just being you and being real and sharing it. And we also Jonathan has interviewed Jake a few times, I think, and you can go on to Tech Vibe Radio. You can hear some other stories as well. And, we're staying close to you, Jake. We're cheering for you, and anything that we can do, that includes the people who are listening, want to help. So that was Jake Loosararian, from the co-founder and CEO of Gecko Robotics. Tonight is Tech 50. You can still register. You can see the link that we have out there, and we've put it out there. There'll be hundreds of people joining us tonight, celebrating in our own special virtual way. And I'm signing off for now. Tomorrow's Friday, right? I have to say that because I never remember. And we have on the show tomorrow, Jonathan.
We have Highmark stopping by to talk about mental health in the workplace.
Talking about mental health, right? Talking about mental health, and the numbers for COVID in Allegheny County have not come out yet. And yesterday was an all-time high. So I think there's going to be a press conference this afternoon by our county health department leader. Anyway, I want to stay positive. So thank you, Jake, for the work that you're doing and your candor. We'll be in touch. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You guys.